If you're ranking college football playoff contenders by resume, which I think is the most fair in an unfair world, the most fair way to do it, what has Oregon done to be ranked where they are? Number 6 in the country, ahead of Texas and Alabama, and is the top one-loss team in America. But when you ask that question, I don't know what the answer is that makes you logically say that they are without a doubt 100% the best team with one loss. Do they have the best loss in America? Sure. But I've maintained throughout this podcast, and really the college football playoff history, of I don't generally care who you lost to, barring if Georgia was to lose to, if Alabama was to drop a game last week, right? If an SEC school that is in the top 6 loses to UT Chattanooga, okay, then I care about who you lost to. But for the most part, I generally don't care about who you lost. I want to know who you beat. Who on your schedule and who did you put on your schedule that should make me go, oh, wow. Who on your schedule does that? And right now that question persists for Oregon. Who on Oregon's schedule makes me go, wow, they beat Utah on the road. That's a nice win. That's a really nice win. Utah's not in the top 25 anymore. They beat Washington State at home. Washington State has fallen off a cliff since then. They beat Colorado when Colorado was number 19, and Colorado's got 4 wins. They beat USC. Great. It's the Trojans. It's Lincoln Riley's worst season ever as a head coach. So when you go through the list of okay, who have you beat? That answer is kind of glaring for Oregon. When you look at Alabama and Texas and hell, even Florida State, they've got answers to that question. Oklahoma's at number 13. They've got answers to that question. Ole Miss is number 12. They got answers to that question. LSU is number 14. They got answers to that question. Oregon doesn't. Oregon doesn't have a logical answer that they can point to and go, this win should matter a lot. We went on the road and beat Utah. Okay. At the time, that's a very good win. I don't understand how Oregon's getting the benefit of the doubt over, Oregon has the oxymoron, the best loss in America. Alabama has the second best loss in America and has a win or two to point to and say, hey, we can say that we did this and it means something. Texas has one loss and has the third best loss in America and can point to a victory and say, hey, we did something that Oregon cannot. Texas went on the road and beat Alabama. Texas beat Kansas. Texas beat Kansas State. Oregon beat Utah. Alabama has a bad loss, but Alabama beat Ole Miss. Alabama beat Tennessee. Alabama beat LSU. They're going to get the chance to play Georgia. Oregon is going to get the chance to play Oregon State on Saturday. And if Oregon wins, Oregon State might drop out of the top 20. If Oregon State is going to be your marquee win on the season, do you have a whole lot to hang your hat on? Now, I'm not against the idea that both Washington and Oregon might be the most explosive, exciting, and entertaining teams to play in college football this year, especially right now. I think if you were to say who are the best teams in America right this second, or have been the best teams in America over the past 3 or 4 weeks, I think 3 of the 4 slots are held up by Washington, Oregon, and Alabama. But if you're ranking teams by resume, which I contend is the easiest and the best way in an imperfect system to operate, what does Oregon's resume say that puts them above Texas or Alabama? They have a They lost a game that they shouldn't have lost. And I don't like, I struggle back and forth with the like, should head-to-head games matter? Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, teams change, teams improve. If Alabama was to play Texas today, I don't know that Texas wins that game by 2 touchdowns. I think it's a 10-point game in the second week of the season, but it really wasn't all that close. I think it's a hell of a game now. So should like head-to-head matchups matter? Absolutely. But it shouldn't be the end all be all. Like if Washington and Oregon play again and they each get a loss, if Oregon was to beat Washington, and that's like the consensus right now is that, I think Oregon would beat Washington. And I think this is kind of the committee telling you that like we think that Oregon's better than Washington, but we have to value head-to-head matchups. So Washington's number 4 and Florida State's number 5, which, by the way, I told you was going to happen. Like, it was logical. One from Washington getting another nice win under their belt, and Florida State having their star quarterback's leg pointing the wrong way. Like, it was a natural that Washington was going to move to number 4 and Florida State was going to be number 5. And it kind of breaks up I had been calling, like the bonded pair, like it was, dogs you're going to adopt from the Humane Society. If Washington and Oregon were a bonded pair and Alabama and Texas were a bonded pair because of the head-to-head matchup, that we think that Washington is better than Oregon because Washington beat Oregon. We think Texas is better than Alabama because Texas beat Alabama. But if you're going to operate like that throughout the entire season, if the College Football Playoff Committee is going to say that head-to-head matchups matter, Texas beat Alabama, therefore Texas is better than Alabama, I don't believe that there's a scenario where the one-loss SEC champion doesn't make the college football playoff. If Alabama beats Georgia, I think we got. I would venture to tell you, barring that there are 3 other undefeated conference champions, that both Alabama and Georgia are in the playoff in that scenario. And Texas is left out. But if you're going to spend every week telling me that head-to-head matchups matter and that Washington beat Oregon, therefore Washington is better than Oregon, and Texas beat Bama, therefore Texas is better than Alabama, it's a hell of a task to then, when push comes to shove, keep Texas above Alabama in the rankings if Alabama beats the number 1 team in the country. Now, I think you can make the argument, and I think the rational, logical person can say, like, hey, did Texas beat Alabama? Yes, but Alabama just beat the 2-time defending national champions who haven't lost since, like, Donald Trump was still president. Okay, like that means something. That makes a lot of sense. But if you're going to rank teams by resume, what is on Oregon's resume that makes you go, they are better than Alabama, they are better than Texas? Because I don't know that it exists. And it doesn't strengthen their resume, really. I mean, it strengthens it to beat Oregon State on Saturday. But if that's your, like, marquee win, your marquee wins are, we went on the road to Texas Tech, we beat USC, Oregon State, Colorado, and Washington State. Okay. But it doesn't hold a candle to Texas beating Kansas State, number 9 team in the country, beating Kansas when Kansas was still ranked, and Kansas was still ranked until they lost 2 in a row, won a 3-point game to Texas Tech and won a 4-point game to Kansas State. Kansas was in the top 25 not that long ago. Alabama's got wins over Tennessee. Alabama's got a win over Ole Miss. Alabama's got a win over LSU. So if you're going to try to put bias aside and say, this is all about the eye test, yada, yada, we're putting the eye test aside, it's all about resume. What in the hell has Oregon done outside of the eye test that makes you think these guys are really good? And they are. And that's part of the plight this year in college football. And I think any of these, I don't think Florida State can win the national championship anymore. But 1 through 4 and 6 through 8, I think could win the national title, depending on who they were matched up against. And I don't think that's outrageous to say. But that part of the thing that sucks about having a 4-team playoff is you got 7 teams that conceivably any of those 7 could beat any of the other 7 or all of the other 7 on a given day. But if you're going to say resume is what matters most, how is Oregon not ranked 8th right now? It's a simple question. How is Oregon not ranked 8th? If resumes matter the most, Washington has a better resume than them. Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Florida State. So not only is it somewhat mind-boggling that Oregon is ranked 6th, Oregon is ranked as the best team with one loss. If that's the case, shouldn't Texas be the best team with one loss? Texas has the best win in America. They went on the road and beat Alabama. And their loss is to the number 13 team in the country in a rivalry game where you kind of throw that stuff out the window. I think you made the argument Texas should be ranked 5th or 4th even, because I think the committee is just waiting for Washington to lose. It appears as if they don't have a lot of respect and admiration for what Washington has done, which is baffling to me, because when you look at the top 25, what are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 Pac-12 schools in the top 25. And 2 of them are in the top 6. And yet the respect Washington is getting is behind Florida State. Seems weird to me. I think that if you were to bug the committee room, I think they would tell you that Oregon, Texas, and Alabama are better than Washington. I think if you were to inject some truth serum into Buke, Oregon, and said rank 1 through 8, I think they'd tell you Michigan is number 1, Georgia's number 2, Ohio State's number 3, Alabama's number 4, Oregon's number 5, Texas is number 6, Florida State is number 7, and Washington is number 8. That is what I think their gut feeling would tell you. But because you got to kind of play the political game and you got to have the right PR strategy and all that stuff, you've got to angle it all correctly. But I still have a major question in how is Oregon number 6 in that resume/eye test matchup? It doesn't compute for me. And I don't know how to get it to compute for me either. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. Certainly appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button. You're watching here on YouTube. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening to the podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping us get in front of more college football fans. Be back at it tomorrow. We're going to pick every rivalry game for the weekend and tell you who's on the hot seat and who's not, depending on the results of those games. I'll see you then here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.